Welcome to the Samuele Tini Show, where business, innovation and sustainability converge to drive progress. Are you ready to uncover solutions shaping our future? Let's dive in. Welcome to a new episode of the show. Today we are going to discuss how to recruit and in a space in tech and where in the Silicon Savannah and beyond. So we are back in the emerging market. We are back where the future is. And we are doing this today with somebody that is the CEO of Talent Safari. So what a wonderful name for somebody and an expert. So thank you so much, Ben Hyman, for being here with us today.
Perfect. Thank you. It's a pleasure to be here.
Talent Safari, it's already a wonderful name. So because it's really embeds the Silicon Savannah, the Safari, Africa, and then of course the hiring process and how to get people in the job market, especially the youth, because we have such a big youth population. But before that, Ben, how have you come to East Africa? So what is your background?
Sure. Yeah. I'm originally from the UK, from London. Studied politics and economics undergrad at Oxford. And yeah, didn't really have any connection to East Africa prior to this, but I basically, I was escaping a career in strategy consulting or law in London, and that led me to thinking about how could I get involved in something that I think kind of actually matters, looking towards the economic development space. And then, sorry to any NGO listeners out there, but I was pretty skeptical about the impact of a lot of the NGOs and had heard good things about the startup scene in Nairobi. And from there, it was basically a case of how do I find a way in? So I came out to people, out to people, I got connections, whatever I could do. And in the end, agreed to join a startup in Nairobi for 3 months, a logistics tech called Letter, and really loved it. And that was 2.5 years ago, and I'm still in Nairobi.
Fantastic. Sounds my story. I was supposed to stay short and now I'm more than 20 years. And I really liked escaping the career in London, maybe with the consulting and other, to join the startup world. So this crazy emerging markets, innovation, and this market that is really what I think is the future. So maybe what is the problem that you're trying to solve, especially for startup talent market, and which are the challenges and opportunity in this market?
Sure. Yeah, I think the problem we saw. So, like going back to my previous job before starting this, I was working at a logistics tech I mentioned called Letter, and I went to Nigeria to set up our operations there. And among other things, I had to hire in the market, hire an operations manager, and I had absolutely no connections. I couldn't go through kind of pre-existing networks because I didn't have strong pre-existing networks. I was there kind of flailing about, reaching out to people on LinkedIn, trying to figure it out. And I think that was maybe the seed of understanding of there really should be some kind of reliable service that could help someone solve this problem. If you are doing it at scale, it should be feasible to have the right talent for companies expanding across markets, trying to hire for their teams. So that's maybe my entry point. And then for Safari as a whole, we're part of Tech Safari, who's a media company for tech in Africa, supported by Shortlist, the executive search firm. So we had a lot of expertise and a platform from those two to kind of get started and tackle that problem of for startups, for innovative companies, finding really great mid-level talent across the continent. I think although there are plenty of HR firms in Africa, there's definitely not other providers in the space, but they tend to focus on their core markets, whether it's big banks or big NGO, and the kind of talent they're sourcing, it's a different mindset to what people would be looking for in innovative companies more broadly, a more self-starter, fast-moving, ambitious, potentially mindset. And so we thought there isn't someone covering that kind of talent. There's a gap. When we speak to companies, they often say, they've worked with a recruiter before and they hated it, so they don't use one anymore, or they just don't bother at all. We very rarely hear them say, we've been working with this company and they get exactly what we want. They've been great. And so, that's really at its core the problem we're trying to solve. Mid-level talent for fast-moving, innovative companies across Africa.
And fantastic. And it's really a niche, but such an important niche because that is where also the innovation, the buzz, and what I mentioned before, the Silicon Savannah is all about. And I want to ask, which are the difficulties, if I can say maybe what is broken that you have seen and what works, in this market. So for the founders, the people that we see these wonderful startups and they've come. So what is the difficult part in the recruitment and where you can help them with Talent Safari?
A couple of difficulties that I think I hear the most of. So maybe structurally for a company, if they've just phased around, they're trying to grow very rapidly, they're making a lot of hires, they just don't have the capacity to kind of put in the time and effort themselves to hire really well. So that's maybe more just on the structural side. But then within hiring as well, there's several problems that these companies come up against. One would be in terms of applications, you post your job, we find that most companies end up kind of at one end of the spectrum. Either no one really sees their job application, it doesn't go anywhere, and they're left with people not are suitable. Or if they do a really good job sharing the role, it gets posted, it gets shared around or so on, they end up with, and most of those applications are not people who are, to be honest, even remotely qualified for the job that they're applying for. It's just kind of once that job listing gets big, people start piling in. So it's the difficulty of narrowing down to good candidates is a big part of it. And then I guess another thing I would highlight is finding candidates with the right mindset and attitude and background for startup type work. The startup ecosystem is still relatively new. It's reasonably big now in Nairobi and Lagos, in Cape Town and Joburg, but even then, kind of 10 years ago, there wasn't that much going on in the startup space in these markets. And beyond those markets, it's even thinner on the ground. And so trying to find people with the right kind of mindset and approach to do startup work, or it's a more specific skill, the right, particular skills in card payment infrastructure for a software engineer or in insurance tech or whatever the problem is quite difficult just because there isn't that big of a pool. And so sometimes you have to be more flexible on the kind of talent you're sourcing, but also you might want to outsource to a company that kind of has a broader reach and a pool of talent and knows who the right players are in each space who can then help find that talent.
And it's a really interesting point. And I want really to ask this question. So for candidates, what do you think is more important? Which areas? Because you have mentioned a bit of both. Some is hard skills or the qualification, the things, the tech, but it's also you mentioned attitude and things. So it's more about soft skill. How do you balance the two things? And what is the best for you?
Sure. What is this is a tough one. I mean, you of course need both, but I think maybe if you're a candidate who wants to improve, the marginal change that will kind of boost your career more is going to be the very basic parts of the soft skills, which is like going to networking events, being good with people, and so on. I think that part's easier to wake up one day and decide you're going to do more of it. I think the other stuff, if you're a software engineer, you need to be good at engineering. You need to know the right languages. You need to have all of that stuff. But I would say if I was a company hiring, I would, relatively speaking, kind of encourage companies to focus more on aptitude and potential than on the core qualifications of the candidate. So yes, it's great if you can find someone who ticks all 6 boxes that you're looking for. But actually, if you've got someone who ticks 4 of those boxes and they're really hungry, they're so excited about what you're building, they're really smart, and fine, it will take them a couple of months to get up to speed on the other 2. But 2 years down the line, when your product pivoted to something else and you need someone to move up into a management position, my money's always on the person with the better attitude, with the better potential, relative to the one who's maybe kind of worked in the correct industry before or ticks the boxes.
I think I agree because, of course, you need a balance. The right attitude is also an important part and often overlooked. I would say everybody goes through the papers, but not the person. If you can share one story, now it's more than 2 years you are around in this talent world. and the startup world. Can you share with us something that is dear to you, some history of transformation or some hire and some support that you have done that really has really touched you and can show the impact of Talent Safari?
So going back to my time at Letter, I met someone at a startup event, maybe 5 or 6 months into my time in Kenya, and ended up deciding to hire them as an intern at the company. Kind of seemed smart, super interested in what we were doing. Didn't necessarily have a big established skills or experience in startups coming in. They just graduated from university. And yeah, they joined as an intern, ended up staying on long term. And then much more recently, maybe 6 months ago or so, having left, is now launching his own startup, trying to kind of build a fitness and dance app for users across the world. And so seeing that journey from kind of originally hiring someone out of university and then kind of seeing them already going on to building their own company is, yeah, it's very nice to see. I can't claim any particular magic in guessing how things would go, but yeah, it's great to have like played some part in helping that to happen.
And wow, that's wonderful. And another part in your journey is the community creation. So how you put together the talent, the startup to find each other, because sometimes there is a mismatch. Maybe they come out of university, they don't know, the startup are looking in the wrong places. So how do you create a community, events and stuff that bring those two parts together?
Sure, I think actually we slightly cheated on this one. We're part of Tech Safari, who I mentioned before, the media company for tech in Africa. They've got 60,000 plus subscribers across the continent. And so basically there's already a community. They have a huge community. They have a huge amount of trust. Startups know them, potential candidates know them. And so really all we're doing is building on top of that. I mean, we have our own Talent Safari community. We've done some stuff there, but in large part, we've taken this pre-existing asset basically, and we're just using it for another purpose. And it's quite a nice synergy. We bring in more people who are potentially kind of joining the Tech Safari ecosystem as a whole, and we're able to draw on that talent pool and that trust and that network that's pre-existing.
Fantastic. And it's really important. You're already starting a position of work. And talking about technology, I think I want to start with a question that maybe is many people's mind that are listening. AI and recruitment. Especially now with artificial intelligence, seems that recruitment will be a job of the past or it will be rather being automated. So what is your opinion on that? Where the human factor still play a role? And how do you ensure technology is also fair in the hiring process?
Sure. I'm going to take the second bit first. So I think on the kind of bias in AI hiring type stuff, my inclination on this is to say it's overblown, and people always like to, technology's great, but they always have to find something that's a concern or a downside in order to kind of have a balanced argument on how something is going. Who's really biased in hiring is human beings. I think the chances that kind of AI or technology is increasing the level of bias seems pretty unlikely to me overall. One good example would maybe be in, say, insurance claims and kind of loan disbursement and so on. Banks and places have been using algorithms and technology for years now to like manage those processes. And all of the studies show that basically the most effective, fair, and way of scoring these claims is the pure technology approach. It was much better than kind of humans doing it, but actually I think in a lot of these cases they found that even if you added human input and the technology to assess these claims, the humans were biasing it away from the correct decisions. So it's not the same as hiring, but kind of in a similar instance with a more or kind of a less sophisticated technology, it's already clear that the technology actually is much less likely to be biased in these processes. That's kind of the high level point. I think in terms of the specific technology, yeah, I see AI tooling across the whole scope of recruiting. And I don't think it's quite there yet in terms of direct interviewing or in kind of the more local tacit knowledge of the market and of companies and that kind of stuff. So thankfully, I'm still in a job for a little while longer, but definitely in terms of various parts of that hiring process, yeah, there's AI tools for sourcing, for interviewing, for finding clients, for basically anything you can think of. Someone's in the process of building an AI tool for it. I don't think all of them are gonna kind of immediately hit, but there's definitely a lot of potential in the space. Some interesting stuff going on.
Fantastic, Ben. And I want now to do some question that maybe that will be dear to the audience, because I want to ask some advice and some lesson learned from different categories. The first one is for the people, the founders that they listen maybe from the emerging market, yeah, from Kenya and within the region. So which advice you would give to them when they have to get their first hire?
Sure. First piece of advice is, who do you know who you think is amazing, and why haven't you convinced them to work at your company yet? That's probably option one. Obviously, some of them are running their own company, they're doing whatever, but it never hurts to ask. And so that would be my top option. If you know people who you are like, yes, they'd be perfect, go and beg them to join, convince them, do whatever. That's the starting point. Now, obviously, there's a limit to how many people you already know, and it might be a more specific position. I think the next step is then go and ask people you trust who are the amazing people they know and try and hire them. So kind of an extension, but yeah, going into your networks and trying to find people from that side. I think in part, this is just a way of finding the best people who kind of you could have some more trust that they really have those abilities. But it's also, if you're a really early stage company, someone's taking a bet on you and on the idea and on that team more so than, you can offer them a great salary package and security and so on. So someone who knows you, or someone who at least is connected to you through someone they trust, is much more likely to take that bet. Once you're going a bit out into the world, like, maybe someone loves the idea. It can work out, but you might also be getting the people who are just very desperate for a job. So they'll take whatever's on the table. So that's definitely the starting advice is first few hires, like through your networks as much as possible. Then, yeah, if you are advertising it more publicly or going out and finding people, I think you want to try and optimize much more for kind of commitment and buy-in to what you're building, and then potential in the person. So someone who's improving at a rapid rate, is conscientious, is smart, has the building blocks to be really good. Because again, if you're an early stage company, you're probably going to pivot in 6 months and their job's going to be something different. And ideally, you've got someone who can do that different job as well. And then the next different job you give them 6 months later and so on. So I'd optimize much more for that and somewhat less for, again, do they tick the boxes of these are the exact skills I need for what I envisage this role to be at the moment, because what you envisage it to be at the moment probably isn't the same as what you're going to see that role as in 2 months and 6 months, in a year, hopefully in 5 or 10 years, when this person could be running the whole company or something like that. But that's a way down the line.
And fantastic, Ben. And now we go to the other side. So, and there we can divide in two categories. For the young people, so there is a lot of discussion how you can get more the young people, the youth, giving opportunities, especially in the tech sector and others. So for people, maybe young people listening, so which are the advice you can give to them? So to match better the expectation of employer.
Sure. I've got a couple of things. I think some more practical. My first one, just because this is a pet peeve of mine, kind of doing recruitment, is update your LinkedIn. It's not that hard. Make it look like you're a competent, skilled person. So have a sensible photo, have some actual description on your roles of what you did and who you are and so on. That's number one, because I think particularly people, like when you're coming out of university or something, you don't really think anyone actually uses LinkedIn. It's for kind of boring old people or whatever. But turns out when you apply for a job, the first thing anyone looks at is your LinkedIn. It's standardized format. It's simple to read. The hiring manager, the recruiter, whoever is going to go to the LinkedIn first before the CV. And yeah, like that's your public record of who you are in a work setting. So that's probably number one. Some kind of bigger things in life, I think, would be being more proactive. So as an example, I think a lot of people just apply for a job online and then they leave it. They go, great, I've applied, I've done my bit. Let's see if I get the job. If you actually want that job, go and reach out to whoever the hiring manager is, reach out to your friend who knows someone at the company, try and attend some event, send them an email, whatever it is, that's going to massively increase your chances of actually making it through. Particularly, I think in Africa, hiring is a lot more network based. I mean, it's already the case, but in startups, it's more network based. In Africa, it's more network based. Once you combine the two, that's very important. And so even if you don't have the network, you can create it through proactive effort. And as I said before, they're selecting for people who really have commitment and a high agency are gonna get stuff done. And this is a great way of signaling to them, I'm really excited about this job and I'm hardworking and I know how to figure stuff out because I'm currently showing you me figuring out how to get this job for myself. So I think that's a big part in being proactive, and also more generally, go to events, meet people, reach out to people, all of that kind of stuff. And then the last one, I think, particularly if you're interested in the startup space, is if you have the time and the capacity to work on side projects. So if you're a software engineer, build some cool tool. It may not be directly relevant to something, but when it's in your CV or when you tell someone, oh, I built this thing, it does whatever, in the mind of a startup person, there's like a big ding in their head of, yes, this is the kind of person I want on my team. They're able to just get up one day and decide to kind of make something in the world and make it happen. They don't have to be guided step by step by someone else. And even if you're not a software engineer, there's plenty of things you can do in this line. And particularly now with new AI tools, they're a great opportunity to try building stuff. But also, actually, if you're any good at those AI tools, there's a huge demand in basically every company for people who are actually going to use AI tools to do stuff. Everyone knows they want to do it, and most of them don't have the time to actually go and figure it out. And so, if whatever the job is, if you come in saying, I use AI for all these things, blah, 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 like that's going to jump you way up the list. I had a hiring manager the other day tell me, here's all the roles, here's all the things I need. And it's a finance manager role. So it's not an AI role, but here's all the things I need. And also, by the way, every interview I ask a candidate how long they spend on it, like an AI tool each day. And if they spend more than an hour a day using AI, like that's a massive green flag. And that's the kind of person I want to hire. So those would be the three. I think there's some practical stuff like make sure your LinkedIn, your CV looks good. But more than that, be proactive, go out and meet people, build things, reach out, and you can make a lot more happen for yourself than if you just kind of wait at home for someone to come to you and offer you a job.
Fantastic. So, I hope you have listened. And there's a tremendous piece of advice. And for people, let's say, because there's the youth, the family, but for people, it's maybe mid-career. People, maybe they want to escape a career in London, in consulting or bank, or people here that they want to repart or bridge, maybe from the international corporation to startup or getting into the agro, market and technology. Which advice would you give to professionals?
Sure. If I'm honest, almost the same thing, I would say. Make sure your LinkedIn looks good. Don't just apply for stuff. Reach out to people and get connections. Obviously, you're going to have an advantage on making connections because you have a career to show for yourself. You're an established professional, so it's much easier. Just find people on LinkedIn, connect with them, ask them to have a chat. Maybe 50% of them ignore you, 50% of them say yes. Ask them for their advice, ask them if they have any potential jobs they could connect you to or interesting companies that fit what you want to do, all of those same things. And then, obviously this might be harder once you're in a full-time job. But again, if you're doing side projects with AI tools or something, that's a great way to show, let's say if you're coming from an NGO or you're coming from a big corporate and you're trying to get into the startup space, the question these companies are going to have isn't, are they a professional who's going to show up for work and send emails correctly and so on? It's, do they have the startup mindset? Are they going to kind of figure stuff out on their own, or are they going to feel like they need lots of structures and direction? And so again, if you're doing projects on the side, you show you can build stuff, you show you're kind of at the forefront of new technology, that's going to prove to them like this is the kind of person that actually can make that transition and can fit in. But again, on the network side, the other side of that is if they know you, or if someone's giving you a referral, they're much more likely to take the gamble than if you just apply online and they see, 15 years at the UN and they're a startup. You're like, yeah, your application's going in the trash can. Whereas if you've already spoken to them and they think, well, okay, this person, like, it's not quite the profile we're looking for, but they seem really dedicated. They seem really smart. I know they're trying out these tools. Like, let's put them through to an interview and see how it goes. So yeah, really, it's the same advice. Be proactive, build things, and also get the basics right.
And fantastic. This is a tremendous piece of advice. So get the startup mindset. I mean, I know especially in NGOs world, the UN or other, people like structure, procedure, and bureaucracy. That's what I personally don't like. And I think startups, they don't like. And I want to ask as a last question, how do you see the market? So, in forward looking and within 5 or 10 years, how do you see the evolution of what we call the emerging market or future market, especially in the realm of startups and other?
Sure. I think like high level, you'd expect a lot of economic growth from these markets. Kenya, East Africa as a whole is growing pretty quickly, barring some significant issue. It should continue to do so. The demographics from the right side and so on. Like this is a whole other conversation. There's plenty of other things that mean structural transformation, maybe not as promising, manufacturing and so on. But the startup scene, look, 5 or 10 years ago, there was basically nothing going on. Startup funding now is easily kind of 10 times more than it was back then. Sure, it's taken a dip since COVID, but it's still at a pretty solid level. I would assume it will continue to grow. I think what would really help that is more exits and more return on capital for original investors, which can then get reinvested and can be used as a proof point for kind of further progress. So there are companies like Paystack in Nigeria, selling for $200 million to Stripe. That's amazing. But there aren't any companies, going into the billions, exiting successfully, making their individual investors, incredibly rich, such that they're going to go and start their own VC fund and start investing as well. So the sooner we start to see those exits, the sooner that investment will start to come in more. But I would still expect it to grow at a pretty solid pace. And with the potential of AI and all of these new market opportunities, there should be plenty more things to build in the near future.
And fantastic. That's a pretty optimistic one. I think, exit is important. Maybe I think that sometimes capital here should be a bit more patient, but on the other side, exits and, returns are really important to really make the wheel move. So Ben, thank you so much for your wonderful insights. I think there's a lot of food for thoughts for people that are listening to us.
Perfect. My pleasure. Thank you for having me.
Are you satisfied after this wonderful episode? Let's continue together our sustainability journey.